Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 65. So we are rattling through the year and we have another fantastic guest with us today, who I will introduce in a minute. But first of all, I will introduce the usual hosts of Health Oddity. Mr. Peter Lant in Bath. How are you doing?
Bath. It's Bath. It is. My missus says Bath I think she says Bath for the bath and Bath for the city. And I'm like, it's the same. I think I've said this before. It's the same word. It's ridiculous. Well, there you go. Anyway, it's excellent.
Bath. Good to meet you. How are you
Hello.
doing? How are you doing today, Pete? You okay?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much.
Good.
How about you?
I am very good, thank you. Very good indeed. Looking forward to this. We've got this conversation today can go a number of ways, and I'm sure it will. And I think it's going to be a great one for the listeners. So I'm looking forward to it. Mr. Paul Bassett in London, how are you doing, mate?
I'm all right. What I'm noticing though is if you look at this screen, if you're on Zoom, and you're looking at this on YouTube, the level of, I suppose, detail that James's setup has versus everyone else on screen. James has an on-air sign. He has all these great characters in the background, Marvel characters. It looks like it's very beautifully set up. I've kind of gone to town and I've got two kind of plants in the background, and then Peter.
Right. What mine is, I've actually got loads of stuff behind here. I've just got, what I've done is done the Zoom thing, took a photograph of a bit of paper.
Oh, right.
And just
okay.
Superimposed that on the back.
So you've got a green screen with white paper.
Yeah. Honestly, I've got like, it's like, it's kind of like, what's the place? Longleat behind here. I've got lions and bears and giraffes and everything.
It would be too distracting, wouldn't it? Otherwise.
Exactly.
I thought James was in a toy shop actually.
That's what one of my guys said to me. It looks like you're in the Marvel display of Hamleys. I said, yeah, it's going to change. It's going to be more stuff here in a few weeks. Anyway.
The security guards will come in a minute.
Anyway, the guest today is Mr. Matt Shaw. Now, Matt is someone that I had met first of all, I think back in about 2015 at a kettlebell cert. He is someone who so I've been connected with and all of us, I think, have been connected with for 5 or 6 years. And he has done lots of different stuff within the health and fitness and I will say adventuring realm, which we'll come in to discuss as we go. I don't want to give too much away, but I think whether you are a strength enthusiast, a kind of movement and mobility enthusiast, if you are somebody who likes the great outdoors, hiking and walking and mountaineering and that sort of thing, there's going to be something in here for just about everybody. So I'd like to welcome, without any more delay, Mr. Matt Shaw. How are you doing, Matt?
Hi, mate. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Hope you're well.
Yeah, we are all good. And I think this will probably be quite good because Matt came down. We were just saying, I think it was about 2018 to Unique Results and did a mace day with us, which was fantastic. And it was a lovely sunny day and we did quite a lot outside as well. So Matt's done lots of different things. I've met him quite a few times over the years, but I don't think I've ever really had really kind of got to know kind of Matt from where he's been and where he's come from and all the different things he's done. So this is going to be a really good, interesting one for me as well. So Matt, do you want to maybe just share with the listeners to begin with a little bit about yourself, where you are, how old you are, what you've done in the past, what you're up to now, and just kind of so everyone's sort of up to speed, and then we can delve into some things in more detail as we go, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm based down in Eastbourne, but business-wise, I operate from Eastbourne and London, but also globally as well with various online offerings that I provide. I've been working or I've had my business since 2008. Prior to that, I was involved in the leisure industry for a little while, or for a few years, on a management level. I've been involved in IT on a kind of education-based level. University, I was doing sports science in Chichester. I've been a competitive athlete all of my life. 47 years old now is the age on the clock. And, you know, I'm really passionate about working with all kinds of people from all walks of life, and ultimately trying to make a difference in their life, or helping them to change their life in a way in which they, or a direction in which they want to move into, and sometimes into directions that they hadn't even considered that they want to move into. You know, I don't have a niche per se. I say my niche is people, because my skill set is such that I can work with anybody and make a difference. And I'm confident in saying that from my experience over the, 13, 14 years I've been in business now, working in people's lives.
And what was it have you always been, you said you've kind of always been a competitive athlete, but so if we go back to, maybe, your teens, your 20s or whatever, what kind of guise has that taken throughout your life? Because I'd imagine, you've been competitive in various different things, and your training has moved. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so for many years as a kid, up until about 16, I was a competitive swimmer. I competed at county standard, competed in lifeguard competitions. And then when I went to university, I was involved in rugby, playing for the uni rugby team. And at the same time, I got into a bit of mountain biking, because I was down at Chichester and had access to the South Downs. So it was a great place for mountain biking. Then when I left university, I moved back up north to be with, to stay with my parents while I kind of figured out what I was going to be doing. And I competed I got into road racing then on bikes, which I was doing for a number of years. And I did that right the way down to the Sussex Championships, when I eventually moved back down south in January 2000. From there, I had an interlude with bodybuilding for a few years. I kind of fell out of love with the bike. And actually what happened was I had a winter season when I was trying to make it into being first category, and I just completely overtrained over the winter. Then come the spring, I couldn't even finish a race. I was massively overtrained, disillusioned with it all. I had a few other things going on at the time, so I kind of fell into just becoming a bit of a gym bunny and trying to pump myself up a bit, which led into a bit of bodybuilding and so on for a little while. And then that wasn't really satisfying me, because it just didn't provide me with enough of a goal. So I got it. That was what led me into competitive powerlifting, because I wanted to do something a bit more, well, what I saw as constructive with my strength. So I competed in powerlifting, and eventually got to a level where I competed in the British Championships for, I think it was 3 years on the trot, under the BDFPA, which was the federation I was competing in, British Drug-Free Powerlifting Association. Did that for a few years until I started to pick up a few injuries, and this was when I had my own business, and the PT business, and I just recognised that I just didn't want to be injured doing the work that I did. I needed to demonstrate, and the injury I had in my shoulder was quite bad for a good amount of time, and I had to navigate my way through that. So me being me, went completely the opposite way and started to get into endurance, because I quite like kind of going between different experiences of physicality. So I went back to my endurance roots and got into some running. And so that kind of led me to competing in 10Ks, 5Ks, half marathons. Then I had a bout of injury, came out of that, and then it was for many years, it was kind of kettlebell stuff, and I wasn't really interested in competing. But then eventually something sparked my interest, and I was inspired again by SAS Who Dares Wins on TV, and I saw this race called the Fan Dance, which I'd never heard of before, and I wanted to see if I could make the grade. It kind of grabbed me when I saw it. I thought, I wonder if I'm capable of achieving that. And so that set me up for sort of 2.5 to 3 years of endurance training based around trying to make the grade for the Fan Dance time. And then ever since then, it's endurance has been like one of the biggest parts for me. I've competed in the fan dance and other test marches in recent years, Ironman being one of them. P Company fan dance is another one I competed in.
Matt, can you just explain to the listeners just what the fan dance is?
Yeah,
so
of
they
course,
just so know,
yeah. So the fan dance is one of the kind of iconic test marches that they use as part of the Special Forces selection process for the SAS and the SBS. It's an event based in the Brecon Beacons, and you start it's on the foot of a mountain called Pen y Fan, the highest mountain in the Brecon Beacons. And what you do is you have a Bergen on. It's loaded for this particular civvy race. It's 35 pounds in the Bergen plus food and water on top. Ultimately, it comes out around about 42-ish pounds. The race is 24 kilometres over Pen y Fan, down to a rendezvous point, and then back up over Pen y Fan and down as fast as you can. The pastime for that is 4 hours. So that was what I was aiming for, and that's what I'd seen on the SAS Who Dares Wins, as these guys trying to complete this thing in 4 hours. And yeah, so that's what the fan dance is all about. And then there's other events based in and around that. So the P Company fan dance is a variation of that, with a trek over Pen y Fan and up the other side of the hills. And then there's a 10K test march after, 10K speed march after that one. And then there's various others as well, which then leads them into test march week with things like Ironman, Ricochet, and various other much more difficult long distance test marches for the selection process as well.
So for the fan dance, because I've done it as well, not as fast as you, but I did it a few years ago. And tell them what Jacob's ladder's like.
Yeah, well, it's as Ken from Immediate Action Fitness there's a video of him online, and he says the Jacob's ladder is a backbreaker, and it certainly is on the way back, because my experience of it every time I've raced it has been one of absolutely rinsed out by the time you get to the bottom. Cramp is a major issue. It's steep. Yes. It's relentless. You come to one bit and it ends up being a false summit, and then you realize you've got a whole extra distance to go.
Yeah.
So it is a character building section of the route, that's for sure.
I was because Pen y Fan's only like an hour and 20 minutes up the road for me.
Yeah.
So we've been there. We go a few times, and we go to Abergavenny and stuff like that, where Phil McDougall, who we've had on, he loves it there. He goes up Blorange and all that.
Yeah.
And he was in the Marines as well, so it's kind of like he spent a lot of time around there. But there was this lady. We were coming up Jacob's ladder, me and Sean, and there was this like this lady, little frail old lady with a little Jack Russell dog coming down it. And this guy walked past, and we were like, "That is brilliant." He goes, "Oh, she comes up here like every week."
Yeah.
She takes a dog for a walk up there every week. She lives around there, and she was like, honestly, she was like in her mid-70s or something like that. And I was like, yes. Yeah. Yes, that's fantastic.
That's it, though, isn't it? That's the whole use it or lose it. You know, if you're used to doing that on a regular basis, no matter how old you are, it's just no stretch, is it? When you've been doing it probably all of her life, you should imagine.
Yeah. She put me to shame.
Well, we used to have my wife had her family's from the Lake District, and she had a lot of farmer kind of family, and some of them were shepherds, and they would compete in fell running. But they just spend their day, they'd never do any running. They'd just spend all day chasing sheep, running up and down the fells, just looking after them. So when it came to a competitive race, they could just turn on the gas. Yeah. And they'd had those many, many years of just ticking over, doing some lighter work every day, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. All adds up.
I was just going to ask, Matt, and obviously you mentioned a little while ago, you were kind of, more into, bodybuilding and gym training. And then something fairly recently, I think it's probably been in the last 12 months. I know you kind of undertook a bit of a kind of I'll use the term body transformation program, but you can kind of maybe frame it how you want to frame it. But and we saw, and all of us saw some incredible, professional photographs at the end of in incredible shape. But like you say, 46, 47 years of age. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of what led you to decide to go down that route and what you did that for, and also a little bit about maybe how the process that you went through to do that as well?
Yeah, of course. So kind of came about because I hadn't really had much of a goal. The previous year, I'd summited Aconcagua, January 2020, and obviously since then, with the current situation, there's not been an awful lot available or going on. And I'm the kind of person that likes to have more of a purpose towards my training. And it just transpired that I'd been doing a little bit of work with Sinead from Feed, Fuel, Perform, just because I'd kind of was aware that some of my nutritional habits were holding me back a little bit, and I wanted to improve my performance. Anyway, when I started to work with Sinead, she kind of highlighted to me some areas where I just got into some limiting habits. Largely a bit of feast or famine was what I was doing, and I was a little bit kind of more keto based, which just wasn't helping my performance for me. Anyway, she helped me to get on top of that, and I started to feel pretty good, and I lost a few pounds. And then I just thought, well, it's 20 years since I last got in shape properly, when I did some bodybuilding stuff before. And I thought, I'm such a different person now to what I was back then 20 years ago. I thought it's going to be an interesting process for me to see if I can just get into the best shape of my life, 46, 47 years old, and just see what I can achieve. So that's literally how it came about. I just felt inspired to explore an adventure within myself, just to see what I was capable of, which is where nearly all of my goals come from. I always seek inspiration rather than, try to fathom something out or whatever. It's always an inspired thing that leads me to it. So that's how it came about. And then what I decided to do was to kind of keep myself more accountable. I decided to book a photographer in order to then have a definitive set point to work towards, and then formulated a plan based upon what I thought I needed in order to get in that shape. Sinead was overseeing my nutrition, which effectively was a balanced nutrition plan: fats, proteins, carbohydrates, with the emphasis on protein, some carbs, quite low fats for me, and in a calorie deficit. But my plan didn't really change much at all nutritionally over the entire kind of 10 weeks is what I did it for. At the time, I had some time on my hands. I've got my little boy who I look after. He stays with me a few times a week. I was concentrating on my business at the time, and so I decided to go just all in. So it was literally the three elements of my life: was the training, my business, and my boy. And so I just thought, right, I'm going to commit to this 100% to see what I can achieve. And that was the process, really. In terms of training, it was a multitude of, I shifted my weight training or strength training work more to a kind of traditional bodybuilding. So a fair bit of machines. I joined a Globo gym. I needed to bring up my back, that I knew was a weak point for me. And that I knew that having access to the machines would really allow me to feel the muscle, to connect with it more, while also sort of working some other areas. And also keeping the endurance element quite high, while still being able to maintain my ability to do kettlebells well, maces, the body weight training I enjoy. I just love training across the board, but I had an emphasis more towards isolation type work and keeping the endurance as a way of really burning off the additional calories that I needed to get in shape, because I didn't want to live off just lettuce leaves and tuna. I still wanted to have a few social engagements. I enjoy a craft ale or a wine or a whiskey or whatever. And so that for me was how I kind of came about doing that, was to increase my output on the cardio to take care of other elements.
So how long was from the kind of, I suppose, the decision that this was going to become a goal to then actually, what was the duration, I should say, from when you started the nutrition and the training to when you booked this photo shoot? How far in advance did how many months were you doing this?
Well, the photo shoot was on the 21st or 22nd of August. It was a Sunday. So reverse engineer it back then, it was 10 weeks. I had 2 weeks prior to that where I actually hatched the plan, and then said to Sinead, actually, I feel like just seeing where I can take this. I think I'd lost maybe 3 or 4 pounds, was feeling pretty good. And I thought, why don't we just see where we can take this? So ultimately it was pretty much a 10-week commitment. And in that time, I mean, I wasn't hugely heavy. I was 76.5 kilos at the start. By the end of it, I was on the photo shoot day, I was 70.5. Which is the lightest I've been in since I was probably a teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something. It's something worth saying, because I do a lot of transformations, with our clients, and one of the things which I have to stress right at the beginning for anyone is you have to be all in. You know, if you really want that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they try and hope that they can muddle through and get a 60% on the diet.
Yeah.
Miss some sessions, give 80% in the sessions, and you get less than that result. I would say, you start.
Absolutely.
You've got to go all in, haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like that's kind of been a character trait throughout your life, is that if you make a decision, it's something you will stick with.
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is, if I want to put some time and effort into an endeavor, I don't just want to take part in these things. I want to do the absolute best that I can do, because for me, in the past, it had been a proving ground for myself, whereby I'd kind of not seen, what I was capable of, and wanted to kind of prove to the world that I was strong and this, that, and the other. In more recent years, I've done a lot of work on myself on a personal level, development wise. And now I just see it as a complete kind of exploration of my capability. But when I do these things, I always I can't not do it to the best of my ability. It's like me doing a half marathon. I don't just want to show up and just be another runner. I want to see what time I can do, what time I can pull out. And so I will go all in for these things, because, that's ultimately in my essence is I just want to explore and go, I couldn't have done that any better. And therefore I know I've laid it all out on the table for myself to witness and experience.
So, I mean, given that a lot of clients don't always have that mindset themselves, I mean, how do you work with other people who come to you knowing that you can achieve those things, but perhaps don't have that not attitude, but just maybe not used to doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I start with a low-lying fruit, really. We look at I say, one of the first questions I say is, what's your biggest limiting factor? Because most people know where they're falling down. It might be, they don't perceive they've got enough time, or it might be that they can't drink enough water in a day. So, and if it's something like that, we'll start at the absolute grassroots level and start on one thing and then build from there. I'm fortunate because I've got my own business. I can, move my time around to suit myself, which obviously a lot of people don't have that luxury. And so it's just about trying to help people to see, the opportunity that they've got in their life, and the kind of life hacks, for want of a better word, that they can implement in order to make things a little bit easier, but also trying to become more aware of the limiting ideas that happen, the patterns, the behaviors. For instance, I remember on photo shoot day driving past a garage, and I saw this picture outside for a cinnamon bun. And this was me driving on photo shoot day. And I looked and I saw this cinnamon bun, and in my kind of calorie deprived state and dehydrated and so on, I looked at that, and for about 5 minutes, it was literally all I could think about. And I thought, this is interesting. This is how a craving happens. Now, for me, I was driving to London to go and get the photo shoot done, but I observed that and I thought I would have two options on this. I could either continue to think about such a thing, and it would eventually probably consume me and lead me into going and just eating that thing. Or fortunately, as I drove away from the garage, what I thought about was the distance happening between me and that cinnamon bun. And actually the desire passed relatively quickly. So that kind of craving that, quite often people really struggle with in order to, kind of put to bed or resist, I think it can be a really useful exercise ground to see it as an opportunity for learning about oneself, and then trying to introduce a stronger pattern of behavior to overcome these little obstacles that happen to come along to trip us up and ultimately hold us back.
Totally. I mean, there's two things there. Number one, everyone listening to this is now going to want a cinnamon bun because they're low.
I want a cinnamon bun. I love a cinnamon bun.
I'm quite hungry at the minute. But number two is you said you were in a calorie deficit, a depleted, and dehydrated and all that.
Yeah.
And people go through their days like that, don't they? Like busy people are constantly depleted somewhere. Yeah. I'm not going to say somewhere in their life, but somewhere in their energy, what they're thinking about, what they're concentrating on. So they end up reaching for something, or they're at home, especially during lockdown as well. If you've got kids and you've got chocolate bars around the house and things like that, and little snacks in the cupboard. People just go in. There's one of my online guys, and he was basically saying he'd be in the kitchen eating a sandwich, and he didn't even realize he'd gone in there and done it, and then he just got out the cupboard, and then he'd be eating it and be like, I didn't really want this. So I'm just, why am I eating this? And it's like, so it's one of those things about being able to, like you say, the biggest obstacle, being able to identify it and then have a strategy of what to do about it. So that's brilliant.
One of the biggest things I learned, because we're always learning, aren't we? Every day is a school day, and as a coach, I never think I've learned enough. And one of the things I identified and learned from Sinead in this was the effect of my sleep. So throughout the entire process, my sleep was pretty bad because of a combination of I was mega busy at work, having quite a lot of caffeine in order to get the training done that I wanted to get done, because quite often I was training at least twice a day, occasionally 3 times a day. And so my sleep on average was probably about 4.5 to 5 hours per night throughout the whole duration. Now, what would happen is towards the end of the day, in the evening time, that's when I would start to get the cravings. And what Sinead identified for me was the role of sleep in that, is that if you're tired because of lack of sleep, your body's looking for quick energy. And therefore it's there kind of knocking on the door saying, hey, you could be having me right now. You could be having this. Maybe you want that. And the process for me was, my sleep wasn't getting better at the time. So it was a real process of me observing those thoughts, almost like a third person, and going, you know what, even though I think I'm feeling this, I'm not actually feeling this because I'm hungry. I'm feeling it just because I'm tired. So really all I need to do is chill out and probably go to bed a bit earlier. And it's that awareness, I think, that I try and instill in my clients is, becoming more aware of the mind trap that goes on, but also understanding that we're not necessarily our thoughts. Our thoughts are just something that rattles through our head, and that actually fundamentally isn't us on a grassroots level. We're something more than that. And that can be hard for people to get their head around, but it's something that I'm massively passionate about, helping to try and become more, in inverted commas, mindful of these things, and therefore taking action based upon the things that they find rattling around in their head.
There's a couple of things there that we had Josh Hillis on the show before. And with a couple of things that you just said, which kind of remind me of things he talked about, was trying to actually, which is actually exactly what you did with regards to the cinnamon bun, is actually trying to put a gap in between stimulus and response. So you feel like you want to have this thing, give it some time, let the time go, and you still want it, And then the other thing was separating the idea behind, are you actually hungry for a balanced, nutritious meal, or do you have a craving for a very specific thing, like sugar, for example? And like you say, that kind of self-awareness, and that actually, putting that little stopgap in between the kind of the stimulus and response can really help people, which I think is great.
Yeah, just about pressing pause, pressing pause and going, is this really me right now?
Yeah. And can you talk to us a little bit, maybe, I'm not sure when the kind of the mountaineering kind of, I'll call it the mountaineering bug for now, but I know it's gone into a real passion for you.
Absolutely.
But when that first kind of, when you first became interested in that, and I know you kind of made a comment about, some of, the expeditions and things that you've been on, maybe just, just share with the listeners some of that, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a qualified mountain leader, summer mountain leader. And what happened with that, again, the process was fairly organic, or completely organic, because at the time I'd been spending quite a lot of times in the mountains training for the fan dance. So I'd take myself up to the Brecon Beacons. It's quite a trek from Eastbourne. It's a 4 to 5 hour drive. So I would go up there and train on the actual route itself. I'd try and get up there at least once a month for a weekend. And quite a lot of the time I spent a fair bit of time in the mountains myself. I'd also done a couple of mountain trips with some friends of mine, Rob from the Commando Temple and a couple of other friends. And so I'd started to spend a bit more time in the mountains. And what I observed in myself was, especially when I was on my own, was I loved the feeling of needing to be self-sufficient. So, when I've been out, when I'd done like 10, 12 miles over mountain terrain with a fairly heavy pack on, is when you start to get that fatigue that comes in, you might get the kind of desire to stop for a bit and sit down and think, God, you know, how long is it going to take me to get back? All of that kind of process, being out in the wilderness on your own, taking responsibility for your actions, because, you know, something bad can happen and you need to get yourself out of it. Around rolled ankle, very common, that kind of stuff. And what I identified was, it was a great thing for me to do in order to build my own confidence, but also connection to, you know, the outer world, you know, the outer terrain, getting out of town, out of my flat, away from normal life. And I absolutely just loved the expanse of the mountains and how it made me feel in terms of a person, which was tiny and irrelevant. And so in that process of kind of connection more to nature and building self-sufficiency and just enjoying exploring new routes and just going out and seeing where my feet took me, is I recognized, especially where I live down in Eastbourne, that there was potentially a market for people to get involved in who could have similar experiences where they're kind of taken out of their comfort zone to experience something completely different, and just add value to their lives, having, you know, experiences that are challenging, exciting, reveal things about themselves that they might not know. And so that's what led me into taking the mountain leader qualification at Plazy Brennan, and ultimately becoming qualified as a mountain leader and taking groups away to the mountains, which is one of the aspects of my business now.
And what have you done in terms of some of your trips that you've done? I know there's one, I can't pronounce the name of it. Pete pronounced the name, the one beginning with A.
Well, Aconcagua.
Aconcagua, that's it. Aconcagua, yeah.
Everybody has a problem with that for some reason.
I wasn't going to try it. Aconcagua, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I know there's a great story that we kind of touched on before we started recording. About your kind of experience of Aconcagua and kind of what happened with that. Yeah, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so that came about actually initially. I've been out there twice now. That came about because of my friend Rob Blair from the Commando Temple. Prior to us going, we'd done some mountain-based challenges. We did a version of the 3 peaks, carrying a 24-kilo kettlebell up on our backs all the way to the top of the 3 peaks over 3 days. We'd done some other bits and pieces as well, and we were kind of looking for a bit of a challenge to do. Anyway, I'd never heard of Aconcagua before. Rob found this mountain. It's down in Argentina, and it's the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. So it's 6,962 meters of altitude, just shy of 7,000 meters. It's a high altitude mountain. It's non-technical, which means you can basically hike to the top, which is an attractive draw, because, you know, my mountaineering skills in terms of snow and so on and so forth are just not there in terms of that experience. And so we decided that that's what we were going to do. We were going to go to Aconcagua on a 3-week expedition, high altitude mountain. And in our view, we were just going to rock out there, march into base camp, smash our way to the summit and come back and feel great about ourselves. The reality of it was an entirely different experience, because, you know, you start at the trailhead, and as you trek into Confluencia, which is the first camp. You spend a night in Confluencia. It's around about 2,300 meters of altitude there, if memory serves me right. From then, it's a very long trek into base camp, where you gain another 2,000 meters-ish, 1,500 meters, something like that. But it's a decent gain in altitude. Anyway, we marched into base camp from Confluencia in 6 hours. They normally recommend it takes around about 8. So we smashed our way in there. All of us suffering really bad altitude sickness, massive headache, dehydrated, really pounding head, breathlessness. We got into base camp and none of us were in a particularly good way. You know, we were feeling pretty sick, pounding headache. Anyway, checked in with the ranger, because that's what you have to do at base camp. And we just set about setting up our tents on rocks and so on. And then the process began, where we took a rest day at base camp just to try and acclimatise a bit. But we were pretty gung-ho. So on Aconcagua, you've got base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, and then you summit push, the general approach. Camp 1 is 5,050 meters. Camp 2 is 5,500. Camp 3 is around about 6 or just under. And then the summit pushes about 1,000 meters of altitude gain on summit day. Anyway, what happens is when we did it self-supported, so we had mules to carry stuff into base camp, but beyond that, it was all on us. So you've got all of your gear, all of your high altitude gear, all of your food, all of your water that has to go up to each of the camps. And so what you do is from base camp, you go and do a gear drop. So you march up to Camp 1, drop your gear off, bury it, come back down, spend a night, and then you move up and move the rest of your gear up to Camp 1, and you kind of up and down the mountain, leapfrogging your way up as you go, taking your water and that with you and so on, because there's not much in the way of water. But we hurt ourselves on the very first day getting into base camp, and then one of the group was really suffering with high altitude sickness from that moment onwards, right, properly, this individual strong, and he was really struggling with it. And then we got freezing temperatures come in, massive storm when we were at Camp 1 overhead, freezing temperatures, gale force winds, and Aconcagua is known for its high winds, absolutely freezing. Anyway, we had a big dump of snow, and the temperatures were coming down to around about -10 to -20. We moved up to Camp 2, spent a day there resting, then moved up to Camp 3. And then all I remember from Camp 3 was that I couldn't get any sleep the night before summit. We were up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to make our summit bid. And I remember coming out of the tent, having been melting water for most of the night from snow, and A, dreading it. B, my pulse oximeter was absolutely rock bottom. It was not good. Anyway, we set off about 5 o'clock in the morning, and it was so cold. We reckoned it was around about -50 outside with the wind chill, because as soon as you took your gloves off, literally within 2 minutes, you couldn't feel your fingers. And then it'd take ages to even get any sensation back. So I remember on this particular day, I'd got 6,000 meter boots, because a lot of the research you do in Aconcagua says they're generally enough. Anyway, within a few hours of going up the hill at an agonizingly slow pace, couldn't feel my feet. And then we got to a point whereby 2 of the team had to turn around because we were going so slowly that we were just not going to make the summit day. So I carried on with my teammate, and the guy I was with had summited Everest years before. He was the second guy from Northern Ireland to summit Everest. And I remember him saying to me at one of the intermediate sections, he said, Matt, it's so cold today. This is like the coldest I've been in. We should really think about turning around and maybe trying another day. And I was so rinsed out. I said to him, mate, I'm all in here, or I'm just not going to do it. I'm not coming back up again. Let's just keep going. So we kept going, and it was I remember my fingers were so cold, I couldn't hold on to I couldn't get my fingers into my gloves. I had mitts on, so I'd got fists in my mitts, and I was trying to use trekking poles, stumbling along this massive traverse to this bit called the cave, which is the bit before the final push on the summit. And the cave is around about 200 meters below the summit. And normally there's a scree slope there. You go around the side of the scree slope up and pop onto the summit. But this was just like 45-degree angles, deep snow. And I remember at that point, firstly, I was exhausted. I've been exhausted for hours. It's a bit like if you imagine running, if you've ever run a 10K as fast as you can, it's like running 10K, but barely able to move. That's what your breathing was like. And what happened was my teammate was a little bit behind me. I was trying to follow a group up, and it was the last group of the day going up. The weather was coming in, the view had gone, it was clagged out. And the first thing I noticed was a shift in my bowel, and I thought, I feel like I'm going to crap myself. Anyway, I carried on a little bit higher. My fingers were numb, couldn't feel my feet. And I'm thinking, what's the risk of frostbite? How many days, hours is it until this kicks in? Because we'd not had any experience of this. It's like unknown quantity. And then what happened was I started to then notice a shift in my body whereby my whole body started to tingle. It started in my fingers, then it was moving down into my legs like a neurological thing. And I thought, this feels like this is like the onset of cerebral edema. And I thought, no, it's just in your head, Matt. It's just hard. You just got to carry on. Carried on a little bit longer. And I remember getting to a point, and by this time I was hallucinating. And I remember looking up at the summit and everything was green. And I just thought, I can't make it. I can't do it. I need to turn around. And I kept having this voice in my head just say, just turn around, Matt, you've got to get back down to Camp 3, just turn around. Anyway, the one guy I was with said, are you coming, Matt? I was like, no, mate, I can't do it. I've got to turn around. A few days previously, a guy died just up at the summit, a Greek guy. So that was in my head. And then my teammate Banjo was behind me. And I started to walk back down. And by this point, I'd lost control of my legs. I was falling over in the snow. I could barely stand up. I came down to him. I was like, mate, I'm not in a good way. I'm losing control of my legs. He's like, cerebral edema, mate. Unfortunately, we got some Diamox and some, I can't remember the name of the other one, altitude drugs anyway, that he'd bought out. Gave me some pills, took those. And of course, when you watch Everest and stuff like that, they do the jab of the altitude drug that we'd got in pill form, and then they carry on to the top. And so I had this pill and I was like, right then, mate, so, you know, what we're going to do? We're going to like just give it a little while and go up. He's like, no, mate. He's like, you are done. We need to get you down. I remember getting back down to the cave after just falling over in the snow continually and sitting there thinking, I'm so far away from home right now and I'm absolutely shitting myself. And in my head, I'm thinking, I need to get home. There was other people falling over in the snow who were in the same kind of position as me. And the hallucinations were getting worse. And I remember walking along this traverse with like just a snow slope heading down. Now the traverse, the path is there. It's a couple of feet wide. But you're thinking, if I just make one mistake and start to slide, am I conscious enough to do an ice axe arrest? Am I even going to want to do an ice axe arrest? Because all I could think about doing was just lying down in the snow to sleep. And I remember saying to Banjo at one point, I was like, mate, can I just close my eyes for a bit and have a rest? He's like, no, mate, because if you go to sleep, you're never waking up again. So I literally followed him down, like bumbling around, just thinking, I need to get home. I need to get back from my little boy. I just can't die on this mountain. I need to get back. And I eventually got back down to Camp 3. Rob and George came out. Banjo had gone ahead. He was like, Matt's in a bad way. I was falling over. There was some guy behind me saying, need a medic, need a medic. He was a German guy. Anyway, we got to Camp 3, no helicopter or anything like that because it was too high. So then one of the porters kindly dragged me down, gave me some more Diamox, followed him down. I eventually got back down into base camp, which was like, God knows how many hours later. And at base camp, I just fell into a tent, was meant to go and get checked out by the medic, but I just didn't even have the energy to do that. I just wanted to sleep. So I slept and then thankfully woke up the next day. And then I thought, right, I'm going to see where the boys are. Anyway, I literally took 10 paces out of the tent. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I am absolutely ruined. And so I waited in base camp anyway. Fortunately, a few hours later, they gradually trickled back in, having, tried to summit and not managed it either. And so that was the first experience of Aconcagua. But all of us came away with frost nip on our toes there, which is like the very early stages of frostbite where you lose some of the coloration of your toes. They turn a bit white at the end. It took me months to get my sensation back in my feet. Fortunately, it came back, but it was, we were just underprepared, way too gung-ho. And I lost, in that time, best diet I ever did, even better than this recent fat loss transformation, lost 7 kilos in 12 days, unintentionally. It was just crazy.
But the thing that's on what happened after that, you came back, you had this failed attempt where you say you probably underestimated the challenge and were very gung ho. And then what happened after that,
Yeah. So after that, what happened was, firstly, I thought I'm going to capitalize on the altitude gains. I'm going to train my arse off for the fan dance and absolutely smash the fan dance. And so I got back into my running almost straight away when I came back. And then what happened was by the May time, my body was absolutely racked in pain. I was getting up in the morning. I could barely walk. My hips were so tight and painful, ankles, knees, hips, no energy at all. I was having to drag my arse out to run. And I had to accept that the fan dance wasn't going to happen. And what that led me into was a process of really letting go with stuff I'd identified with for so long, because I'd gone and had some physio. I'd had an MRI on my hip. There was, cartilage wear and tear, and my ball and socket was sitting deeper in the joint. And it was kind of like, need to modify the training a bit here, Matt, if you're going to have, longevity moving ahead. And for a good couple of months after that MRI, I thought, is this it now? Have I broken myself? Am I beyond repair? And what it led me into was doing some mace spell work. I'd done the mace spell certification with Mr. Maceman, Rick Brown, who is coming to your place at the end of this month. Mega exciting. But it led me into doing more mace and just very light, almost like, well, a lot of flow type stuff, because it was literally all I felt I wanted to do was just to move my body, to work on my ranges, but do something that wasn't just, you're just doing yoga and stuff like that. So I spent a good part of 6 months training with the mace, just improving my skills, getting into it, doing a bit of self-expression through the flow type stuff. And then by the end of that year, a kind of little voice in me, a little inspiration was like, I feel like I'm kind of ready to start lifting some heavier stuff again. My body was feeling good. The fatigue had left me. And so I started to get into doing some kettlebell stuff and some modified strongman and, you know, that kind of stuff. And then working with heavier maces. And that then kind of led me into my training then for the next few months of just rebuilding my body and letting go of this idea that, you know, that I was broken. And that was the process I had to go in. I remember a few months after having the physio and the MRI, and I thought to myself, you know, Matt, you can't always believe what people have told you. You know, they've got an idea of, you know, what they think you're capable of and who they think you are. And I thought there's nobody who knows me better than me. If anybody's going to heal myself, it's going to be me. And I'm going to heal it from the inside out. And so that was a process of, you know, being mega aware, letting go of tension, being aware of areas, processing it. Oh,
what happened there? You disappeared.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you back. Yep.
It was a real process of kind of inner journeying really, and doing everything in my power just to gradually rebuild. So it's, you know, gently doing movements that I felt my body wanted to do and that I enjoyed, and also doing some of the movements that I didn't enjoy. And then gradually over the time, my fitness felt like it was coming back. And so then what happened was, in that process, I kind of identified that I felt like I was ready to go back out to Aconcagua again. And this time what I'd identified was I just wanted to go out and just do it without knowing anybody, so I could just completely focus on my own game. So I went out there with a group called the Elite Himalayan Adventures, and their lead guy, Nims Dai, is a fantastic mountaineer. He'd summited in the previous year in 2020. He'd summited all 14 8,000 meter peaks in less than 6 months, which was a massive world record. Previous world record, I think, was about 7 years. And me being me, thought, if I'm going to learn from anybody, I want to learn from the best. And so I'm going to go and invest in an expedition with him. So I booked on with that and his team of amazing Sherpas. But on the run into it, I thought this time I'm going to do everything in my power to make myself, or put myself in the best possible position to summit Aconcagua. So what that basically involved was me doing a couple of high altitude or higher altitude treks. So I did the Tour de Mont Blanc in June of that year before I went out in the January of 2020. So Tour de Mont Blanc, it's an 11-day trek. The highest you go is around about 2.7, I think. But it was enough exposure just to get a little bit of altitude in the body over a good few days. Really nice trek to do, all the way from Chamonix into Italy, then Switzerland, and back into France again. So I did that in the June, July, and then I've got connections with Brighton University. And I was fortunate enough to be able to get access to use their altitude chamber. And so in the October time, I started to use our altitude chamber for a couple of times a week to do some work on a treadmill in there, up to the height of Mont Blanc. Altitude is how high it would go, so 4,800 meters, I think it is. So I trained at doing that. And then in the October, I went out to Morocco to climb a mountain called Toubkal, which again is a non-technical mountain. It's quite easy to get out there. You can get out there and do it in a weekend, long weekend. And that's just over 4,000 meters high. And over a couple of days, you get up, you summit it. So summited that, no problem at all. Came back down again. And that was a real nice confidence builder that actually I could handle altitude so long as it was done at a sensible rate. And then throughout that time, then from October through to the January, I went all in with a kind of altitude and endurance training. So I was in the university between 2 and 3 times a week for an hour to up to 3 hours with a 20-kilo pack on my back on an incline treadmill. The guys at Elite Himalayan Adventures had stipulated certain kit requirements, so they had to have 8,000 meter boots, not 6, and various other things like full down suit, as if you were summiting Everest, basically, because of the conditions that can happen. So I trained in that stuff in the altitude chamber, not the altitude suit, obviously. And then also I used an altitude tent at home, which I slept in. Well, I initially slept in it most nights, but this thing is like, it's like a plastic bag that surrounds your bed. It's like sleeping in a crisp packet. And you have a generator by the side of your bed that makes you sleep. It's like sleeping on a building site, basically. It's there all night long. And it makes sleeping very difficult. So I started off doing that as many nights a week as I can. In reality, it ended up being about 4 nights a week towards the end, because it's horrible to sleep in, but necessary. So that was my approach. And then I went out there in the January of 2020 and summited Aconcagua with a multitude of others with the support of the Elite Himalayan Adventure guys.
That's fantastic. That is absolutely brilliant. And how was the experience the second time going back, because you'd already done it once and you knew, what was the experience like the second time?
It was an amazing experience. It was a peak life experience, because the first thing was getting into base camp and just feeling absolutely fine. Energy was a little bit less, but all the altitude stuff had paid off for me. And I remember getting there thinking, God, I feel way different to what I did the first time. The downside with Aconcagua base camp is the water supply comes off the glacier. So one of the things that everybody gets, unfortunately, is the old base camp belly. And so that is a real thing that you have to drink 4 to 5 liters of water a day in order to minimize the high altitude sickness. But in doing so, you're just like, the water's treated, but it just goes straight through you. So you're in at these disgusting loos numerous times a day. And after a week or so of doing that, you can imagine it's a test, mental test. It's all everybody talks about in base camp. It's like, oh, got to go and do that thing. But we went, and actually we spent a long time in base camp because we were waiting for another member of the team to join us. So we spent about a week in base camp with actually only 2 acclimatization tracks, one of which went up to Camp 1 and we came back down, and then we went another day and did a bit more. Anyway, what happened was, on this occasion, the weather window was very small. Now, Nims is an ex-Special Forces guy and Gurkha, and his mentality is certainly one of strength. And so he said, guys, this is going to be the summit plan. We're going to go to Camp 1 and spend the night. We're going to go to Camp 2 and spend a few hours. We're going to skip Camp 3 and go straight for the summit push. Now, I remember having reservations about that, because I was like, we've not even been above 5,050 meters. This feels like, this is going to be a test. And I was concerned I wasn't going to make it, truth be told, because it felt like we were going to, we were pushing too hard, and B, that we were going to acclimate, that we weren't going to have enough time to acclimatize. And also I'd spent a heck of a lot of money getting out there. You're looking at spending about 10 to 12 grand on an expedition, which is relatively basic, Aconcagua. So I was aware of all of those things and just not wanting to have to go and do it again. But as it happened, we trekked up to Camp 1, and we got up there in record time. It was like 2.5 hours, which was pretty quick. And I'd got all of my gear on my back, some snacks and stuff. The Sherpas had carried the water up to Camp 1, but I was still carrying 20 odd kilos of weight on my back. We spent the night, 3 of us crammed into a tent at Camp 1. You get to know your teammates pretty well. And then the next day, it was about a 4-hour trek to Camp 2. We spent, I think it was around about 4 or 5 hours just chilling out, trying to rehydrate, get our food, sort our minimal kit out to go to the summit. And then we left my group left at 11 o'clock at night time. for the summit push. And there was myself, Phil and Carly in my group, and we left with 2 Sherpas, Jangbu and Lakpa. And we set off at 11 o'clock in the night. And it was intense because the Sherpas were way, those guys at altitude are phenomenal, because that kind of altitude doesn't really bother them. You see them carrying these massive loads, they're barely out of breath. And yet here we are as Westerners, absolutely suffering like hell. Anyway, we started off fairly quickly, and one of the group started to be sick. And then what happened on the way to the summit was they were sick around about 6 to 10 times on the way up. It was proper high altitude sickness. And that was just because the acclimatization strategy was so aggressive that she was in a bad way. And I remember just saying to myself quite early on, I just need to focus on me. The guys will take care of the other 2. I just need to focus on my game. And, all of the doubts that creep in, it's so hard just moving, 1 foot and then the next. And it feels like you're never going to get there. And it took us we eventually summited at 10 a.m. the following day. So from 11 p.m. the previous night to 10 a.m. the next day of pretty much constant moving. And, it's not that far to go, but it's so slow that it just saps everything from you. I still ended up hallucinating near the top. I remember stopping in the cave and having a little rest at the bottom. And we started going up. There was no snow there this time. The temperatures were wildly different, clear skies, completely different experience, but still brutally hard. And I remember looking down at the stones and me picking up a stone and uncovering it and just seeing the number 50. I thought, it's a bit weird, 50. And then everywhere I looked, I kept seeing 50 buried in the rocks. And I was like, this is just weird. And you've got this level of I can't overstress, like this level of fatigue. You close your eyes for 10 seconds and you can feel yourself falling into sleep. It's like a siren calling you onto the rocks. It's almost irresistible. You're like, just close my eyes just for a minute and you just want to sleep. Anyway, you carry on. And I got to the bit where I turned around last time and I just spent a moment there just remembering what I was like and how scared I was. And I just thought, this is totally different this time. Carried on. Then I was hallucinating more. I saw what I thought was a deer on the summit. I was like, oh my God, there's a deer on the summit. Well, absolutely nothing lives on Aconcagua. So seeing a deer on the top, I was like, rubbed my eyes. I was like, oh no, it's not even there. It's gone. It's just a figment of my imagination. Carry on. And eventually got to the top. And I remember Nim saying, right, I don't want to see anybody crying at the top. Don't want to see it. And I remember getting to the top and I was sat next to an Aussie guy who had become good friends with. And I just sat there and I was just completely overwhelmed with emotion. I was just like, this was the place that I didn't think I was going to be able to get to. This was the place that was beyond the reach last time. This was the place I've prepared to get to the top of this time and succeeded. And it was it was a real overwhelming sensation of just, personal pride, recognition of struggle and endeavor, and just the whole process of what it took in order to get there.
It seems to me that on one hand, the things that got you into trouble the first time were the things that kind of got you out of trouble the second time.
Yeah.
That ability to do the hard things, to push through, to take into account things that other people won't do.
Yeah.
That got in you in trouble, maybe through a little bit of naivety around the trip and what it took, but it paid off the second time around.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I believe in is when things get hard, we have to try and step away from survival mode and just focus on doing the stuff better. That's where things like in kettlebell training, the technique really comes in, is don't focus on going harder, focus on doing it better, dial the technique in, make it more efficient. And so with the mountaineering side of things, anytime I noticed any doubt within myself start to arise, unlike last time I was like, I've got to get to the top. I've got to get to the top because when I get to the top, I'm going to feel better. This time I recognized that every time I felt that struggle and tension coming in, I needed to relax more. And before I'd headed out there, my mentor, who I've done a lot of work with over the years, she gave me a Buddhist chant to use in my head for when times started to get hard. And I used that throughout the entire process in Aconcagua, whereby whenever I started to doubt myself, or I started to really get too aware of my body, I would go into the chant and just go into it in my head. And by thinking about that chant, it stopped me from worrying about whether my body was going to be able to do it or not. And it just allowed me to relax. And I could feel a tangible improvement in my efficiency just by becoming more relaxed and not being so tense. Almost how I visualized it in my head was my floodgates of energy would open when I relaxed more. If I was too tense, then I would get constricted and it just wouldn't flow as well.
Well, that was one of the things that we had on a podcast with my brain's gone.
Harinder.
The martial artist. Why is my brain gone?
Harinder.
That's it. Because someone's paying attention. Yeah, when he had similar issues with his when he was swimming and caught in the waves, and he decided just to relax.
Yeah,
because he knew that he wasn't going to be able to take on a wave and win. He had to just relax through the kind of it smashing him against the floor and things like that.
Yeah. I think it's just a case of, this thing's not going to improve. It's going to get harder. So I just need to relax in the moment and just literally take one step at a time. And every footstep leads you to the top. And, we talk about that a lot, don't we, in fitness circles, in every step is important, but it absolutely is, because too much focus on the goal at the top, getting to the summit, can actually cause a bit of anxiety. And, you look up and think, Christ, how long is it going to take me to get there? Am I ever going to get there? Instead of actually just bringing the awareness down close in and just going, right, the next step, take the next step, and then the next step, because those are the most important steps, because those are the ones that ultimately take you to the top.
No, this has been absolutely fantastic, Matt. And I think we've probably gone just over the hour or something there. So I think that's a great place to start to wrap up. I think that, that kind of, I won't call it a failed attempt, but an unsuccessful attempt, and then going away. And it just sounds like the way that you then, the intelligence and the focus that you then brought to your preparation to go back the second time and to have actually achieved that is incredible. And what I think we'll have to try and find a picture of you up at the top to use for the cool. For the kind of the thumbnail and stuff for this episode, because that's so powerful. That's brilliant. Pete, do you have anything you'd like to say? Do you have any sort of final thoughts or any sort of summing up, or
how long have you got? Honestly, I've written loads down here because I thought we were going to have a chat afterwards as well. So we'll have to get you on again. Okay. But that is like what you've just said there, because like people, we talk about like bringing it back to kind of normal stuff.
Yeah.
That's like the ultimate of, like you've said, of what we talk about every day, of just making things. I've written loads down here, but I've got like, give yourself as much chance as possible to succeed, right? Yeah. So just go. It's not about like you said, it's not about pushing towards the end and knacking yourself. It's like actually getting there and being like, I've made it.
Yeah.
And making it as easy as possible. So using 8,000 meter boots instead of 6,000 meter boots and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you said something about it's one step after the other. And it's like, instead of people concentrate on the goal, and it's like, and we always say this, and people say it a lot, and it's in memes and everything. And we always talk about all these memes and stuff like that. And it's like, you've got to understand it. You've got to live it to be able to do it. You can read the thing and go, oh, that's very inspirational.
Yeah.
But you enjoy the process thing.
It is that, mate. You just
what do you need to do tomorrow? And what do you need to do today? And what, like, and I talk to my guys about this all the time. It's like, right, here's your goal. What do you need to do now?
Yeah.
Because don't worry about anything else. Because if you're not going to do the thing now, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It really makes a difference. And it's getting that point across is really hard. And so hopefully everyone listening to this, that'll be, that's just made me think it all through again, everything I've ever done. Like, which has never been as extreme as that, but everything I've ever done, I'm like thinking back through, like, how could I have approached that differently or better or whatever?
Yeah, mate. Every goal's the same, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether it's climbing a mountain or achieving fat loss or pressing a half bodyweight kettlebell or running a 5K. It's the process that takes you there. It's the process that you have to focus on. It's the day in, day out behaviors that then grant you access to that particular outcome. And that outcome doesn't happen if you haven't done the process. The process has to happen. Otherwise, you're just never going to get there.
Yeah.
No, it's great. Mr. Paul Bassett, do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to say?
Yeah. In a way, the story's much better from having failed. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, it's the honest truth, isn't it? But the thing is, a lot of people, they go into fitness programs and they fail, they in inverted commas failed. Maybe they've tried hundreds and hundreds of things over the years and none of which have seen any results. But what I would say is the main difference is, I would say that very few have really committed. They've maybe tried a lot of things, and regardless of the failure that you had with this initial summit, there was no denying that the commitment wasn't there. The thinking was perhaps flawed at times, and you were slightly underprepared in certain other areas. But what that led to was a change in behavior, and not only did you obviously maintain that goal, which was important, but then you, by the sound of it, you visualized every step to get yourself there, and you thought, okay, so here's a scenario which I struggled with here before. What do I do to get myself ready for that? How do I create a situation in which I am prepared? I have a higher baseline. I'm going to think outside the box, and I'm going to go in there knowing and trusting my body. In a way, it was a false trust initially. It was a thing, I can push through this. I can push through this. All I need is a stronger mindset. But your body was saying, hey, look, listen to me. And eventually you listened. But this time, because you'd done all that work, there was so much trust that you could marry your strong sense of determination and focus with the work, And
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is, harder is not better. Better is better. I can't remember who said that. It's somebody strong for somebody like that. But it's true, isn't it? Is harder is not better. The amount of people I work with who think that they just need to go harder, and while that can serve us in certain aspects of our life in terms of physicality, that is definitely not something that happens. In that, we need to work more intelligently on these things and with better understanding, rather than just throwing harder stones at the wall and hoping some of them are going to stick in there. We just need to take stock and reevaluate, and then do things better the second time around.
Excellent. And if I'm sure people will have, I've really enjoyed listening to you talk today, and your physical exercise history, and especially the kind of mountaineering stuff was absolutely fascinating. If people want to find out more about you and what you do, and maybe connect with you online and things like that, what's the best way for people? Where would you direct people?
My website is coachingsure.co.uk. I'm also pretty active on Instagram as well as Coaching Shore. You can drop me an email at contact@coachingshore.co.uk as well. Those are the main avenues to get me on. I'm not really onto Facebook that much these days, but Instagram, website, email.
Brilliant. No, that was really fascinating. And like Pete said, it feels like we kind of hit a natural end of the story there, but it would be great to maybe down the line to get you back on again and kind of delve into probably, like we started to do at the end there, maybe some of the kind of lessons that you took from those experiences, and then how like we just did in the last 5 minutes there, those things that can actually relate to the everyday listener and some of their more everyday kind of challenge that they have. Absolutely. But that's fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on, Matt. That was brilliant. And it was a very different conversation than we've had before, which I knew it would be, which is why I thought it would be really great to have you on. So thank you for that.
We'll have to talk about next time as well. I've got it written down here because you mentioned it in the very beginning. What a lifeguard competition looks like, because in my head it's running along the beach in as slow motion as possible.
It's nothing like Baywatch.
Trying to look as sexy.
Nothing like Baywatch.
What was it? Dwayne Johnson versus what was the little guy? But the film they did. It was a terrible film. But
I've not seen the film.
Maybe it being Eastbourne, the average age would be about 70.
Let's not go there.
Very.
Apologies to any listeners in Eastbourne. Paul lives in Putney. Go and see him.
So, guys, I just want to say thank you so much for listening, for continuing to listen to the podcast. Please do give us a like, share, a subscribe, and if you're listening or watching on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please do that as well. And also please do share with your friends and colleagues and family and anyone that you feel may be interested by the content that we're putting out each and every week. So And also we have our Facebook group, just searching groups, Health Oddity. And we had a few people sign up to the group after last week's episode. So that's gradually growing as well. So say goodbye, Mr. Peter Lance.
Hurrah!
Ta-ra. Say goodbye, Mr. Paul Bassett.
Bye.
And say goodbye, Mr. Matt Shaw.
Goodbye, guys. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, listeners, and we will see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.